be back right away, but I really enjoyed today, and so thank you all.
Thank you.
My sister Carol and brother-in-law Dennis are here from Georgia, and they love this cool weather.
Oh, yeah. As of Thursday.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, you're right.
they got here Thursday.
Right? Thank you for bringing us.
And we love the beautiful
We'd like to
trees.
take it back.
Yes. Have a little bit.
Thank you.
Take some rain with you.
Yeah, you don't have to sing, but I thought.
Well, welcome everyone. Before we do our sermon, I have a short reading. Oh, after our offertory, because we're going to do that first. Our offertory, you'll see we passed around some baskets. They're split in half. Half is for UUFM. The other half is for our quarterly charity, which is Unidos Bridging Community. And you can read more about them in your pamphlet. If war is holy and one sex is obscene, we've got it twisted in this lucid dream, baptized in boundaries, schooled in sin, divided by difference, sexuality and skin. Oh, so we can hate each other, fear each other. We can build these walls between each other, baby, blow by blow and brick by brick. Keep yourself locked in, yourself locked in. Yeah, we can hate each other, fear each other. We can build these walls between each other, baby, blow by blow, brick by brick. Keep yourself locked in, yourself locked in. Oh, maybe we should love somebody. Oh, maybe we could care a little more. So maybe we should love somebody instead of polishing the bones of holy war. What if one sex was holy and war was obscene, and it wasn't twisted? What a wonderful dream, living for love, unafraid of the end. Forgiveness is the only real revenge. Oh, so we can heal each other, feel each other. We can break these walls between each other, baby, blow by blow and brick by brick. Keep yourself open, yourself open. Yeah, we can heal each other, feel each other. We can break these walls between each other, baby, blow by blow and brick by brick. Keep yourself open, yourself open. So maybe we should love somebody. Yeah, maybe we could care a little more. So maybe we should love somebody instead of polishing the bones of holy war. What if love is holy and hate obscene? We should give life to this beautiful dream, 'cause peace and love ain't so far if we nurse our wounds before they scar. Nurse our wounds before they scar.
gosh, Bryn. Again, you brought me to tears, and I'm sure others. All right. So a short poem before our sermon. You cannot love another until you truly love yourself. These words, often whispered on the winds of sound advice, delivered by someone who knew better than my young, inexperienced self. But as I've grown, lived, and traveled in and out of relationships through time, the words are not just floating on air into my words. They're starting to settle within, like so many somethings my heart longs to know. To open yourself is easy. Compassion flows freely when the one across from you is in pain, reaching out to your heart with open arms and shining wet eyes. But when those walls are up, when others hide behind those strong barriers, each unheard pain a brick surrounding the heart, and they move through the world with their struggles hidden away, their actions come out disjointed and raw. It is then I find struggle in connection. It is judgment of action that is forefront. It is then I forget to look within and open my heart and wrap my own pain in empathy, so I may do so for others hiding in their own. You cannot love another until you truly love yourself has shifted within my soul and has grown into an understanding that we must drop judgments in order to build connections, and we must forgive, starting with ourselves. I would now like to introduce Rick Davis, who is Salem's minister and has been for over 30 years. He is well-versed in Zen Buddhism, UU ministry, and graduated from Emory University's Candler School of Theology. Welcome.
Thanks, Heidi. Thanks, Brent, for that beautiful music, too. It's always good to be at McMinnville. Gosh, I've been coming out for quite a long time. When did you guys start? How many years ago?
2007.
Huh?
2007.
2007. So I've been coming out ever since then, so I know a lot of you for a long time. It's good to be here. I got some comments to share with you this morning, so let's get started. Except for having my tonsils taken out when I was a young 3-year-old boy, I have only spent a couple of days of my life in a hospital bed, thank goodness. And that was many years ago when I was a senior in high school. And I was in the hospital bed because a co-worker, J.H., at McDonald's Hamburgers in Columbus, Georgia, where we worked on weekends, he was angry about something in his life. And then something I said, pretty innocently, set him off like dynamite. And he began physically attacking me until somebody pulled him off. After work, I had to face off with him in a fight, the cause of which was an utter mystery to me. Utter mystery to me. J.H. had picked his victim well since he was 6'2" of solid muscle, and I didn't even know how to land a punch. It just wasn't in me to smash another person's face with my fists. So I stood up and put my fist up like this, and I got pummeled until my nose was bent off to one side. And finally, I lay bleeding, weeping on the ground. Later, I took my bloodied and body home, and my mom, she got mad at me for getting in a fight, as though I had had any choice in the matter. Now, up until this time, I thought of J.H. as a good friend, someone I admired and respected. And then suddenly, on that afternoon, he just betrayed me with this violent episode. And these positive feelings that I had once had for my friend were now replaced by another feeling. Hate. You might be shocked to hear a minister confess to hating somebody, but we all have the capacity to hate. And since this capacity is woven into our psychology, it has shaped human history in profound and far-reaching ways. And not all of them are bad. Hate, some say, has its role to play. Take, for example, if somebody is abusing you, and they do not relent, and they do not seek forgiveness, and then some well-meaning soul advises you to let go of your anger, your hate. They're actually prescribing aspirin in the emergency room. It's well-meaning, but this advice is ill-timed and thus ineffective. It's not the right time to tell somebody to let go. In some instances, it might not only be your right to hate, it might actually serve an important purpose. What? What am I saying? Telling you to hate? How could that be? That doesn't sound very spiritual. So I turn to the psychologists for support here, and they note that yes, hate, you have hate, you can hate, and hate can serve a useful function that could help you identify and separate yourself from an abuser or an abusive situation. It takes a very strong emotion to make that separation, and hate fills the bill here. It's an authentic expression of true feeling. Acknowledging who you hate is better than pretending otherwise. Better than pretending otherwise. Hate is very uncomfortable, and you might wish to pretend that the human heart did not have this capacity to hate, but it does. And there are many who advance convincing arguments that sometimes hate has actually served for the advancement of humankind. Strange as that may sound, historians can provide countless examples of when hate was needed to fire up the pistons of historical change to get them moving. It took the abolitionists' pure hatred of the institution of slavery to bring about its end, and otherwise this supremely dehumanizing practice would have lingered on for a long time if there's nobody that hates it. People they put up with, they don't like it, they say, that's too bad, They needed somebody who hated it to get it over. Such is the complex nature of our lives that sometimes things can't be so easily judged or fully understand from normal ethical perspectives. The Bible even gives a positive nod to hate in the Psalms, wherein we read King David expressing his, quote, perfect hatred towards the enemies of God. You find similar sentiments elsewhere in the world religions, especially in the Abrahamic faith traditions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. All of them were born under trying circumstances when they were having to contend with real enemies who were really trying to exterminate them. And for this reason, in their respective scriptures, you find apocalyptic scenarios wherein the battle between good and evil will come to pass. There will be a final time of judgment when the good will prevail and the evil will perish. Consider the book of Revelation. It's the last book in the Bible. It barely made it in. A lot of people didn't want to put it in, but they did. Last book in the Bible. It's a text that is grounded in hostility, hate toward the oppressor, the Roman Empire. Yet it's also a book that's been especially empowering, a cathartic text for people who've lived under cruel and unjust circumstances throughout the ages. But now, in retrospect, we see how it's a perilous business to have dualistic us versus them narratives woven into your religion, because you never know what horrendous mutations will occur over time, because hate that is sanctified, promoted by religion or an ideology, it can infect entire societies. Today you can look back upon the battlefields of human history and remember the tragic consequences that ensued when two combustible substances, hate and religion, have gotten mixed together. Same holds true when hate and politics get mixed together. I'm not promoting hate today. I'm acknowledging that hate is real, that hate has its natural place in the spectrum of human feelings. And it's meant to function as a momentary spark to separate us from harm. Yet too often the spark, it becomes a smoldering underground fire. It's often kept alive and stoked by those who have vested interests in keeping hatred alive, because hate can be enormously profitable. Purveyors of hate know that it is a potent elixir, and it's perversely empowering. It quickly becomes addictive. It is the methamphetamine of the spiritual realm, hate. And it'll take you to hell, and it'll lead you to create hell for those around you. Hell. You don't talk about that much here, do you? I don't think. What am I talking about? A Unitarian Universalist minister talking about hell. I am a UU, Unitarian Universalist, and I abhor notions of eternal damnation. But a person can fall prey to hateful states of mind. You can fall prey, people can fall prey to hateful states of mind. They create both inner and outer hells. Indeed, the great American mystic and spiritual writer Thomas Merton, he's a great soul, Thomas Merton, he defined hell. He said, hell is hatred. Hell as hatred. He wrote a whole essay entitled Hell as Hatred. And you can see how this plays out in history when hate has had the upper hand and has created hell on earth, as it did in Holland, or the Netherlands, as it's now called, back in 1942. 1942, the Nazi occupiers were enforcing their systematic genocidal campaign against the Jews with the cooperation of a small percentage of Dutch citizens. This is how a hate that is nurtured and stoked long enough plays its final hand. In the end, it proves to be a death cult. Ultimately, if you follow any of the many paths of hate far enough and long enough, this is where it leads. You want to exterminate your enemy. What a tragic and horrendous scene it was. And it is in the midst of this hell that we encounter Eddie Hillesum. Eddie Hillesum, Esther Hillesum. Has anybody ever heard of Eddie Hillesum? Well, you're going to hear about her today. It's there in Nazi-occupied Holland that we encounter Eddie Hillesum. She's a young Jewish woman, and she recorded her impressions in her diary as she and other Jews are being interrogated by the Gestapo agents. And in this tense, crowded room, you can imagine there is venomous hate and abject terror. Yet as a young Gestapo officer yells at Yeti, she is not filled with either hate or fear, but rather compassion and understanding. And she looks at the ill-tempered young Gestapo agent with acne on his face, and she can see through his bluster. She recognizes that he is an unhappy soul. She wonders if he has recently been jilted by his girlfriend back home, or maybe has experienced some other kind of disappointment that's fueling this irrational hatred of the Jews. But even as his delusion is deadly, Eddie still sees him with the eye of wisdom and compassion, and understands that he has been reduced to being a cog in a vast machine of death. And later, Eddie witnessed a sorrowful scene of horror unfold before her as the Dutch Jews at Westerbork deportation camp are being shipped to the concentration camps where most of them would perish, including Eddie. And she wrote in her journal, Give your sorrow all the space and shelter in yourself that is its due. For if everyone bears his grief honestly and courageously, the sorrow that now fills the world will abate. But if you do not clear a decent shelter for your sorrow, and instead reserve most of the spare space inside of you for hatred and thoughts of revenge, from which new sorrows will be born for others, then sorrow will never cease in this world and will multiply. Eddie's life was cut short when she was sent to Auschwitz, but she left behind a really important spiritual legacy. It's a shining example of light during a time of great darkness. And I would recommend to you Etty Hillesum, An Interrupted Life, The Diaries, 1941, 1943. Remarkable woman. I need to encounter people like this to show me what you can do in a climate of hate. And I think back on my own experience when I was facing my own persecutor many years ago, and I didn't do as well as Etty. Fear and hate clouded my thinking. I took this beat down by a bully very seriously, very personally. And unlike Etty, I did have thoughts of revenge. It's natural to have thoughts of revenge when you've been beaten or mistreated, especially in the face of persecution and injustice. I'm like that. I've always been like that. Over the years, I've always found myself siding with the underdog because I have always hated to see people mistreated or marginalized. So it's been natural for me to support certain social and political causes when it's for the underdog. But then, over time, I noticed a disturbing trend within myself. I was thinking of people who opposed the enlightened views I held as a unified block of people deserving of my anger and scorn because they didn't believe or vote like I wanted them to. Sometimes in extreme moments of anger and frustration, I would feel hate towards them, although I would not have consciously labeled my feeling hate, but it was. Gandhi advised, hate the sin, not the sinner, but I couldn't do that. I could not direct my ire with such spiritual precision. My hate tended to be aimed at sinners as much as their sins. The social psychologist Jonathan Haidt has warned against this, and he comes up with a term that he calls vindictive protectiveness. Vindictive protectiveness. And I suppose you could say I had a case of this. The telltale symptoms being feeling hatred and contempt towards whole categories of people you imagine to be on the wrong side of things. So I needed help. And equally important, I was ready for it. Timing is everything. And it's always timely to encounter the great 9th century Buddhist poet sage by the name of Shantideva. Shantideva. Some years ago, our meditation group read his classic text, The Way of the Bodhisattva. The Way of the Bodhisattva. And Shantideva clearly, compellingly, with penetrating insight, examines the psychological and spiritual conditions that create structures of hate in the human heart. He exposes the skewed perspectives, the flawed thinking, and the false attributions, the utter folly, the great danger and dire consequences of being in spiritual bondage to hatred. That's Shantideva. He's pointing out to you again and again, hatred is the worst form of spiritual bondage. The entrance to the Italian poet Dante's Inferno, hell, sums it up well, proclaiming, abandon all hope, ye who enter here. Indeed, when you enter the realm of hate in this world, you have given up hope. Hate has no room for anything but itself. And it's certainly not going to allow you to entertain thoughts that things can get better, that people can come to understand one another. Hate will hear no such talk. Long ago, the poet Homer recognized that hate is perversely pleasurable. Don't we love to see the bad guys get it in the movies, don't we? Revenge is sweeter far than flowing honey, wrote Homer. Revenge is sweeter far than flowing honey. Makes a lot of money, too, those movies, those vengeance fantasies. The perverse joy that hate can provide gives a sense of focus and meaning as you join others in despising those who don't think like you or look like you or live in the wrong parts of the country. Hate can be perversely unifying. We're all together on this. We hate this thing. It's a pseudo-transcendence, I call it. The hate, when you're euphoric with your hate. Think of a Nazi rally. It's hate, but it's pseudo-transcendence. Hate offers us pseudo-transcendence. And there are alarming indications that many are unwittingly walking this path of hate due to a common spiritual blind spot, which the French author Baudelaire noted when he wrote that the devil's greatest ruse is to convince us he does not exist, which is a fancy way of saying that it's hard to recognize hate or evil in oneself, especially if you're part of a large group and you label yourself as the good guys on the right side of history. You can go off and do whatever you want because you're the good guys. You're the good guys. Well, Shantideva points out the delusory thinking that would dissect and carve humankind into enemy camps. Enemy camps. And he is characteristically outrageous, bold in his views because Shantideva operates in a spiritual world of cosmic proportions. And he makes boundless cosmic demands upon you. And in that vein, this ancient sage said that you should rejoice and you should be grateful if you have enemies, because they provide you the greatest opportunity of all for spiritual growth, for liberation. Have boundless compassion, especially for your enemies, he taught. Well, I'm not so sure about that. That's a hard one, isn't it? Frankly, that's a pretty tall order for me, and I dare say most folks. And I have wondered why such boundless goodwill and understanding is necessary. I mean, I'm supposed to have goodwill and compassion for everyone? For everyone? Why is that necessary? And then I remember the universalist roots of our Unitarian Universalist tradition. Our Universalist forebears were quite a diverse array of spiritual misfits. They were often working class folks, but they were all united in their rejection of the doctrine of eternal damnation, which has been throughout the centuries one of the key doctrines of the church. And this doctrine, this belief, has done more to justify hate and create hell on earth than any other I can imagine. From a belief in eternal damnation flows a host of cruel attitudes and practices. Holy wars, inquisitions, crusades, all are the spawn of this doctrine, which became official church doctrine in the 5th century, after which time you could be burned at the stake and condemned to hell for not believing in hell, especially if you shared this belief with others. The early American Universalists, also known as the No-Hellites, they were the ones who championed a belief in universal salvation. They proclaimed that no one is damned for an eternity. And in this process of affirming that no one is damned for an eternity, they pulled the rug right out from under all possibility all possible justifications for having eternal enemies. Our Universalist forebears differed on whether there was any kind of a temporary hell or punishment for misdeeds in this world in the afterlife. There was, believe it or not, a big conflict between the ultra-universalists and the restorationist universalists. The ultra-universalists said, you go to heaven immediately, and the restorationists said, nah, if you got bad karma, you got to work it off. And they had a big fight about this. I don't know why. But none of them believed that hell was an eternal repository for God's rejects. Now, what this means, if you take our tradition seriously and seek to embody it in your life, is that you can't regard anyone as an eternal foe. According to the principles of universalism, you're called to follow God's example and love everyone. This, of course, is pretty challenging because you and I aren't God. You may not even believe in God. But whatever the case, you'll fall short of such a divine ideal without help, some help. And help can come in the form of a helpful insight. Trying to be good and have compassion for everyone all the time is a hard business. And the help in doing this comes from the Buddhist tradition. The historic Buddha described to us an inner realm. I'm talking about an inner realm that's in you, that's in you, that's in me, that's in all of us. He talked about this inner realm known as the four divine abodes, or the four immeasurables, or the four Brahmaviharas, godlike virtues. And these are excellent, lofty states of mind that you cultivate in your heart and your mind. The four divine abodes are metta, goodwill, karuna, compassion, mudita, taking joy in the joy that other people have, and upeksha, which is equanimity. Here's some good news. These sublime states of mind are innate within you. Once you become aware of them, you will naturally seek to cultivate them in your daily life. And today, as I have considered the reality of hate and ill will and its sorrowful consequences in our world, I'm especially mindful of the first of the four immeasurables, metta, which is boundless goodwill, a desire for the welfare and happiness of all beings. Metta, goodwill. It is the antidote to the ill will that pervades our world. Metta, goodwill. Long ago, the Buddha said, cherish all living beings with a boundless heart, radiating kindness over the entire world. Cherish all living beings. Cherish all living beings with a boundless heart, radiating kindness over the entire world. These ancient words strum deep chords in the human heart. These thoughts of kindness, goodwill to all beings. Listen to this music. The more you listen, the more you tune your heart to this music, the more your life will become the music. Cherish all living beings with a boundless heart, radiating kindness over the entire world. Let's meditate on this. I invite you to think of the hate that is in your heart. I invite you to be aware of it, to examine it, to understand it, to understand yourself. I invite you to consider all the people around you in your life on a day-to-day basis. Can you make it a practice to extend to them goodwill, to habitually extend goodwill towards all those around you, to lift up your heart with goodwill. As we practice, so we become. As we practice, so we become. Congregation has a wonderful opportunity to join together and examine the highest and holiest ideals and come together, and we find common energy and common purpose in promoting kindness and goodwill in this community and beyond. May each one of us embody our religion. May each one of us bless the world. Amen. Okay, sure. Last time I was here, we didn't have question time, but I guess we have it. You had a congregational meeting, I believe, right afterwards. But anyway, so we have time for, and you can let us know how much time we do have. So if you have any